I would say good morning, but it's not good morning, is it? It's good afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry that it's slightly later than usual. I had to go to a meeting. I had to attend a meeting this morning, so I wasn't available at the regularly scheduled time to do it. But I thought, you know what, you know that you'd be devastated if I didn't do another lesson for you. So I thought, you know what, let's do some lessons. Let's do a lesson on outsourcing. We're making some good headway here. So I think although the pandemic things affected education quite dramatically, I think it's been. We've had the opportunity, definitely us, we've had the opportunity to be talking about subjects which we would have never have talked about, until way later on in the spec. That's been good, hasn't it, in that regard? It's pretty useful. So we're going to jump in straight into it. It's not going to be a particularly long stream today. I won't keep you too long, because it's not really a crazy detailed bit of the spec, but I thought we'll get straight into it. Okay, let's go. So we're going to talk about outsourcing. You've probably heard of outsourcing. It's to do with production. It's to do with capacity. It's about giving the experts the ability to do things. Essentially, the idea being that everybody is better at one thing than others, and companies have specialities, so why not draw to those specialities? Why try and do everything yourself is not always the best way to do it. And we call that outsourcing. All right. So explain what is meant by outsourcing production and evaluate the arguments for and against outsourcing production. That's what we're going to do. Now, before we get started though, outsourcing doesn't have to just be production. Okay, so we are going to talk about that, but we are going to, just to clarify, that you can outsource anything you want. You can outsource HR provision, human resources provision. You can get another company to do your books, accountancy or something. You could get an outside accountancy. You wouldn't usually have an internal accountancy people who would do it. It depends on the company though. Some companies are very large and some companies have the ability to do that. Smaller companies might do it themselves, or might decide to outsource that provision of saying, right, well, you come in and do this for me, because we don't have to employ accountants and stuff that other than let's just get the ones outside, or cleaners and things like that, or cafeteria staff and catering staff and things like that. So you'd be surprised how many things with outsourcing there are. It's not just production. All right. So what do we already know about outsourcing? We would usually do this, and we'd all get together and do a thing on the board or whatever. But just ask yourself this: what do you already know about outsourcing? Can you think of any examples of outsourcing that you may know of? We've just used a couple of them there, haven't we? Outsourcing cleaning staff, outsourcing catering staff, HR provision. Sort of development teams and stuff and things for your online stuff is quite regular as well. So people will outsource the technical side of the company. The IT provision. You'll have IT support, but it won't actually be on site. It'll be off site because it'll be a separate company. I have a friend who literally does that. He is IT support, but he does it in. He does it from an office, essentially, not from within the company. And other companies get the tech support from them. And why? Well, because they are experts in tech support, and the companies that are dealing with them are experts in their own stuff. So whether it's supermarkets, whether it's distribution companies, whether it's other companies, they are experts in their own stuff, aren't they? They're experts in doing what they do, but they're not experts in IT support, so why bother? Just get someone in, just buy the experts in would be a good idea, wouldn't it? So it says, consider this news article and think about the questions below, because there are questions about outsourcing of whether we should be doing it and whether it's applicable for all situations. Now, the BBC News article here says, outsource marketing to cut teachers' workload. And it says, teachers should reduce their workload by outsourcing the marketing of pupils' work to staff overseas, suggests a leading education researcher. Now, on here, let's answer these questions before we go on to actually discussing this. Let's have a look at the questions. It says, what do you think outsourcing means? Well, we already know, don't we? Outsourcing is, sort of giving the authority to complete a task from yourself or from the company to a separate organisation or a select group of people who are better at it than you, essentially more experts in it than you. Why do you think that it's been suggested? Well, why do you think it's been suggested in this respect? I think it's because a lot of the time, teachers' time is taken up with marking, isn't it? I'm definitely attesting to that. Vast majority of my time is taken up by marking. I would have never have been able to do this, for example, make resources like this, like having the full YouTube channel and everything that we've been working on. I would have never have had time to do that in normal circumstances. It's been a happy accident, really. A silver lining to this whole pandemic thing is the fact that I've been able to have enough time to be able to do a YouTube channel, which I'll be able to use for years to come. That, multiple years of students will get the benefit of this. And maybe I would have time to do that if I hadn't been doing loads of marking. But marking is something that's very important as well, because it allows me to actually see what my students are creating, doesn't it? It allows me to make a connection to the students to be able to understand what they're physically doing, and as well to get an idea of it. So if I get a student who's only giving in a tiny little bit of a little bit of work, or not handing in work and things like that, yes, all right, I might be able to see that they've not handed the work in, because I might get a phone call from whoever is marking it and says, well, Dave hasn't handed in his work, and I'll go, oh, okay, and then I'll chase him up. I can't see handwriting, I can't see spacing, I can't see paragraphing, I can't see I can't make my own judgment on that, and ultimately I've got to be the best person to make that judgment, haven't I, considering they're in my class and I'm going to be working with them. So essentially I need to be the one doing this, because I need to be able to look at what they need to improve on and things like that. So there's an argument for not everything being able to be outsourced with this. Do you think it's a good idea? What problems do you think it might create? I think it's a good idea in some respects. I mean, I know Intel, the company that make microprocessors and things like that, they've been working on an AI to mark long pieces of work, and what they were doing was they said they've got it so far, but they can't get it to understand inferences. So when you sort of speak between the lines about stuff, it doesn't understand that. But I reckon that AI will, we will get to a point in that, in which case, will we need teachers to really teach anymore? I don't know. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I've got this thing in my mind that the more of outsourcing you do, the least, the less the actual company has to physically do in terms of themselves. Yes, they could specialise, or it might mean that the company isn't required anymore. I don't know. It could go either way, couldn't it? So it's an interesting one to think about, that one, isn't it? It's just an example. Now, the Marriott TV, I can't show it yet. I'll link it in the description, okay? But it says, what is the main message? What are they trying to promote they do? I think on this one, if I remember rightly, they're talking about the fact that they don't outsource stuff. Because they're showing that that people do a wide range of stuff, and they're trying to show that if you get people to do, if you outsource everything, you're going to get loads of people doing different things. I think it's that one. I haven't watched this before. I've seen the advert before, but I've not watched it just before this stream. I should have, shouldn't I? It shows how terrible I am at my job. But the interesting one with this one is it brings up a good point, doesn't it? Should you outsource stuff? Well, if you don't outsource stuff, if you get the same people to do everything, this guy on here who's dressed in, who's got the vacuum cleaner, if the vacuum cleaner guy is also expected to be doing the accounts later on that day, then it's difficult to, if you're just getting one-size-fits-all people, then no one's going to be an expert in it, is it? And I'm not saying you can't multi-skill workers. We've already been through that, haven't we, of why we would multi-skill workers and things like that. But you wouldn't expect, I wouldn't expect to go and teach a lesson and then go and, unblock some blocked toilets, because that's not my position, is it? And as well, I'm not as competent as unblocking toilets as I imagine someone who is an expert in the subject in terms of works for a company who's a professional cleaner would be at unblocking toilets. There would be probably techniques and things which I wouldn't know about, just the same as they wouldn't know about the stuff from me. So getting rid of outsourcing completely, although they go, we don't outsource stuff, we don't get loads of people in from different companies and we look after our own. Yeah, that's fine to an extent. The problem is if you don't then appreciate that you can't specialise and deal with the consequences of that as well. So, what is the definition of it? The definition is the delegation of one or more business processes to an external provider who then owns, manages and administers the selected processes to an agreed standard. All right, let's just break that down. The delegation, do you remember what delegation is? It's where you give the authority to do something of one or more business processes to an external provider who then owns, manages, and administers the selected processes. So they can run it however they want, as long as it's successful and meets the standards that we require, which will be pre-sorted before we do it. The contract will say how we're going to do things. Excuse me. And it says it occurs when outside suppliers are involved in activities that could be taken internally by a business. Now, with that in mind, there are a lot of different things, isn't there? There are a lot of, internal processes that you could outsource, you could give to an external provider. And simultaneously, there are a lot of external stuff. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff that your internal people could do, but probably is not best that they do as well. Just the same as I said, getting teachers to unclog the toilets, or I finish a lesson and then go and serve chips to students at lunchtime. It's not sensible use of my time because I need to be able to do other things, don't I? And realistically, what do they say? Jack of all trades, master of none. So I need to be good at one thing, really, don't I? So I can specialise and get the best people to do the best stuff. So there's an argument for and against it in that respect, isn't there? Now, examples of things that could be outsourced. We've got phone or call centres, very much so. Would you really bother getting your own call centre, or would you get an external company to do it for you? Problem with that, if you remember, if we're thinking about the problems of it, would be the consistent in customer service, consistency in quality and things like that. People get very angry when they go, oh, it's an Indian call centre or something like that. I don't think they're angry, and the fact it's in India. Although a lot of people seem to have this really, crazy thing about, that they don't have that there's a language barrier or something. Personally, I haven't really found them to be that difficult to hear, but I know a lot of people do. I think it's the idea of it's just people want what they want. So if you know that people have like a real weird thing, a little thing that they don't like, people having quite strong accents, you'd have to be aware of that, wouldn't you? And it's funny actually, because a lot of people use these as USPs now, in terms of a British call centre. Well, you could have people in Britain who has a very strong accent, and the amount of times that I've rung up places and you get someone with a very strong Irish accent or a very strong Scottish accent, and you think, well, it's still very difficult to talk to you. It's still very difficult to understand what you're saying, if it's very broad. So I personally, I don't care, about stuff like that, but I can understand why people get upset about strong accents. I think they need to worry less about the fact of where it's situated, whether it's on another continent or not, and just think about the customer service, the ability for the provider to provide that service. IT systems, like we said, ability to do that and not actually have people on site of doing it. A negative of that could be the fact that we'd be more difficult to just nip down and see them. Sometimes you have to do that, don't you? Delivery and logistics, get a company like DHL or, Hermes or something like that. But remember, you are beholden to the customer service and the quality of that thing as well. Like Hermes, for example, a terrible company. It's ridiculous. As I said, the amount of times that I've had really bad service from them, it's just ridiculous. I don't know who they're employing. I think they're just employing anyone. But the problem is, I bought from like Mountain Warehouse. I bought a coat and I got it delivered. And who turns up? Hermes. And they put something through my letterbox, and I wasn't in because I was at work. And they didn't put any number on it or anything for me to get in touch with them. It's just blank saying we're going to try and deliver it again. So the day after, they try and deliver it again. Guess what? I'm at work, so because I work every day, so they couldn't deliver it. So they put another blank thing through. And it went on for like 4 days. I ended up, because you can't even speak to Hermes about it, it's ridiculous. I ended up ringing Mountain Warehouse and having a go at them about it and saying it's just ridiculous. And they said, yeah, no, Hermes is absolutely rubbish, isn't it? And you're thinking, well, that's the problem, because Mountain Warehouse, now, next time I'm thinking about that, I might think, you know what, I'll buy it from Go Outdoors, or I'll buy it from somewhere else, because you've got to remember that the outsourcing things, okay, they might be better at it, or you might not have the capability to do it, like logistics and stuff, but also they might affect your customer service and things like that, and the fact that we're talking about it now. Elements of production. So you might have specialist equipment in a different company that they can do. They might, have a pressurized something or other that they can do, or a glass, or whatever it is that they're doing. They might do a specific part of the production process, and capacity utilization from that perspective as well. Ability to continue to provide extra capacity if and when needed. You can outsource you think you could give it to someone else, couldn't you? So you could say, well, actually, we don't have the ability to do that at this moment in time, but I do know a company that we could work with to do that. Hence why companies sort of team up against things sometimes, don't they? Then we've got services and skilled workers, e.g. lawyers, consultants, the kind of stuff as well. Is do we need? Do you want to really be paying lawyers in house? Because you're going to have to think about pensions. You're going to have to think about other things that you're going to have to contribute to them, consultants and things like that. Or is it better to go to an external agency who are more gifted in that respect and have a better reputation? We know that they've got their own capacity and things like that. Catering, Starbucks at college is a good example of one, isn't it? Do we need? You want experts in it. So if people want people who are really good at that, you don't need teachers. You don't want teachers going and doing it because they might not be that good of a cook, or they might not be that good at making coffee or whatever. But if you get people in to do it, it means that we don't have to worry about doing it, and we get a really good service, and students get a good service as well, don't they? What about security and things like that as well? You've got to remember that the insurances and things that go with this are intense, aren't they? You've got to imagine that there will be people who are trained. An organisation, let's take college for an example. If you're at a college or a school will not have the capability or the training to be able to train up security guards. They just don't do it, do they? And they won't have the necessary qualifications. They won't have the necessary insurances and stuff necessarily to do all this. And imagine if we were doing all this ourselves, we'd turn into a really, really confused organisation, wouldn't we? Imagine trying to set aims and objectives for a company that does, recruitment all the way to call centres, all your IT systems. It's all in-house. It's a difficult one. Legal services, accounting services, recruitment. Recruitment's another one that is done quite a lot by outside agencies, and these companies that will do assessment centres and things for you, or create a sort of numerical reasoning tests and things like that. I've always found them to be very unhelpful, really. Like the amount of times where I've seen people not get jobs because they failed a written test or something, which would have had no impact on the way that they do their job. So it's a crazy one, because you're dealing with companies where you're thinking, but that doesn't seem to make any sense. You've got to whittle down applicants, but the way that you're doing the application process doesn't seem to make any sense. It doesn't link to the job that these people would be doing. Anyway, enough of me complaining about numerical reasoning tests, eh? So why do we use outsourcing then? What is the good things about it? Well, reduce costs significantly, and reduce all the other things that we talked about as well, in terms of not just the direct cost, but the other costs that surround it. Increase efficiency. Increase efficiency of yourself, increase efficiency of the things which you're trying to do. Because remember, you can be an expert, you can focus on the stuff you're doing. They can be an expert and they can focus on the stuff they're doing. Assess specialist resources or skills. Access specialist resources. Remember, you're not going to be able to have the top stuff in the world of everything, are you? So actually having access to that stuff is going to be really helpful to an extent. To solve defined problems, to make businesses more competitive by focusing on its core competencies. Remember, your core competencies are the things which you are good at as a business, the things which make up your USP, the core of your abilities, and focus on them rather than focusing on the things that you can't do and just get someone else to do that. It's easier, isn't it? If I have a problem, if I want something building, I'm not that great with stuff like that. I could learn, and I might have to eventually, but ultimately it's probably better for me to just pay someone rather than going out and having to spend the time and ability and things like that. If I've got the money, then it might just be better to pay someone, because it would cost me more money in terms of hours spent to actually physically do it. So there's an argument outsourcing things like that. Do you outsource it to a plumber? Do you outsource it to an electrician? Do you get an expert in to do it? Yeah, okay. Now, it says, read the article in your packs and make notes on the question and be prepared to discuss them. Now, I don't want to do, obviously, you haven't got access to these at the moment, but what I would like you to do is, there's BBC and IBM, you can Google them, you can have a look at them in terms of, what they've been outsourcing. But what I would like you to do is, I'd like you to find an example of a company that does outsourcing, and just, have a look into it, or find 2 or 3 if you can, because remember, in the exam we want things that we can draw upon like this, can't we? They might give us an example, they might not. So if you've already got an example of thinking, well, I know Ferrari outsourced this, I know BBC outsourced this, I know IBM outsourced this, I know college outsources this, then because you'd be surprised, a lot of it you probably already know. You might even be involved with the outsourcing yourself, or a family member or something like that who has a small business. So go online, have a little look, and see if you can find some information on 1 or 2 of them. That'll help you. So it says, these are the kind of questions that you might get in the exam. All right, so feel free to answer these about the things that we've just talked about. But it says, summarise in 1 sentence what the BBC have done. So in terms of this, what has your company done? How have they, or why have they done it? Sorry. Is it to free up... Is it free up capacity? Is it to have the ability to be working on other things? Is it to do with core competencies? What is it? Why do they need to? What do they need to do? And have they done? Sorry, what do they need to do? What have they done to ensure that it's been successfully implemented? And what issues might they encounter? So there's a couple of different ones there, isn't there? Seeing it from a range of different perspectives. But if you can see, we've got AO1, we've got AO2, AO3, and we've got our AO4. Okay, so you constantly want to be thinking of the negatives and the positives of these things, of why it might be done, what the positives are, what the potential issues are in that regard. Okay. So arguments for and against in this. We'll do a little bit of evaluation now together. Let's just figure these out together, okay? So it says, if you were to talk about your AO4, arguments for, the more important thing is the evaluation to give the next stage, isn't it? So if we reduce costs, that's less labour or capital needed, so less money, less labour needed, then what does that depend on? Well, it depends on the ability to actually do the thing, doesn't it? So if the company that we are using has the ability to adequately provide this provision, to be able to maintain standards, to be able to give good customer service, to be able to maintain our reputation, because remember that you can't buy that, then we have an ability, don't we? But if we have, it has to depend on that. Because if they don't, if they were to mess it up, that would lead to the business, having a bad reputation and failing, e.g. Mountain Warehouse with me and Hermes. Existing workloads and stress level reduced, yes, but very important if the business is operating near or at full capacity. Remember, it's particularly important that, isn't it? But as I said, it does require us to be confident that the company can actually complete the things. Allows access to specialist services. What can that do? Well, it can enable us to create more complex products. It can create us more consistency in products, more different products maybe that we wouldn't usually have access to. But it might also mean that if we were to look at the negatives of that, it might also mean that we don't specialise as much as we usually would, because maybe we take our eyes off the ball because we can see lots of possibilities of working with other countries and companies. We might go, well, actually, we should have been working on our core competencies when we weren't. We were looking over there at what potential things that we could do. May lead to higher quality products. It could do, couldn't it? It could really do. It could. We can be utilising the best of other companies as well, and to get them on board with us and things like that. It does require us to have that faith in the company that they have the ability to do that, and it may also lead to lower quality products as well, depending on what the circumstances are. Avoids large amount of capital investment, because we don't have to actually get the stuff ourselves. We don't need the big machinery, we don't need the masses of warehouse space. Instead, we can let them do it. Remember though that means that we won't have the capability to do things internally. So if we don't invest in stuff like that, if we are giving it that, we've got to think about that supplier power things, haven't we? Do you remember we were talking about the 5 forces, Porter's 5 forces? We're talking about supplier power and things like that. So if we got to a situation where our suppliers were too powerful, if we ourselves weren't able to create these our own products because we've outsourced too much of it, then if that company was to fail, or if that company was to put its prices up, or whatever it was, they could have a massive detrimental effect on us as a company, couldn't they? Same things for these. So arguments against may lead to poor quality. Quality can be hard to monitor. It's true, can't it? So Obviously, this will depend on the type of company. Hopefully, you'll be sensible and try and find companies that are reputable and that you won't just go with the first one that you've picked. We have less control over it. We have less. That means in a range of things, we have less control over timing. We have less control over things. The more people you get involved with, the more scope there is for problems arising, aren't there, as well? So obviously that and that will matter more, in terms of evaluation AO4. It will matter more for companies where consistency is really, really important. Whereas you might get other companies, you might get certain things which maybe they're making really cheap products where consistency isn't as much of a problem, or they're one-use products or something like that. That's not the end of the world. Could demotivate employees and put if it puts jobs at risk. It could, couldn't it? You've got a problem with this, and that would obviously depend on the type of company it is and what you're actually going with. A lot of companies will actually have a look at that. In the sort of in the when they're looking at the capability of the company, they will look at the capabilities of the current provision as well. So hopefully they would already look into whether the employees could be doing this and rather not make them cheaper. But that is a problem that companies can often be cheaper, so you'll just go with them instead and actually make your own people redundant. Less flexibility in responding to unexpected occurrences, spikes in demand, production may be out of the business's control. Like I said, it really does give that supplier too much power, doesn't it? And it means that we aren't able to do things. So if we are using outsourcing to give us more capacity, then perhaps we're not looking at the real issue, in which case we should be looking at, well, actually we might need to increase capacity, not just outsource it all, because if we outsource it all, then if there is a spike and maybe they aren't able, what if the capacity is full at the suppliers as well, because they might not just be supplying to you, and it's not like you can order them to do anything, because ultimately they are they're a supplier to you, but they might be a supplier to lots of people as well. Suppose you've got the worry as well if that supplier might be dealing with your competitors, and you could have a bit of a clash of interest there, couldn't you? So who do they more work for, if that makes sense? And information leaks and data security as well. So, I mean, I kind of touched on it there partly, but what if that supplier was to give information away, wasn't it? And what about these people coming into places? Like, you get stuff like, BAE Systems, military stuff, and they get outside companies, they outsource stuff like cleaners and things like that, and you think, well, it's military secrets, isn't it? So you've got to be very careful. You've got to be thinking, well, who is this person? Because you might do loads and loads of security checks on your staff, but are you doing as much security checks on your staff that are from external agencies and separate outsourced companies? Probably not. I mean, it probably is in terms of military secrets. I don't know what amount of detail they go into, but it's probably easy to think that they wouldn't do as much as they would. So let's have a little look at a question. We've got a question here. It says, discuss whether or not Bell's Electrical should be outsourcing as a method to accept this order. Now let's have a look at the. There is a case study. I'll just give me one moment. I'll just grab the case study on here. And I'll pop it on here for you, if I can, because I've got an answer for you, but I'll show you the case study first. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, there you go. So, let's have a look at this. It says, Bell's Electrical produces household electrical items such as toasters, kettles, etc. They have been successfully achieved growth over the previous years, and they're currently maintaining 92% capacity utilization. Can you remember what ideal capacity utilization is? It's 90%. So they're doing okay. They're slightly over what we would want. They produce goods under their own brand, Bell's, and also supply Tesco with goods under the Tesco own brand. Okay. They have received a request from John Lewis for a 2-year contract to supply initially John Lewis's own brand kettles. There is a possibility of extending this to other goods such as toasters if it proves successful. They would struggle to meet the number demanded by John Lewis as it's beyond their current capacity. So the question is, discuss whether or not Bell's Electrical should be outsourcing or should use outsourcing as a method to accept this order. It's an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because you are actually having an outsourcer, because the supplier here, the John Lewis and Tesco, are outsourcing production to Bell's, and then Bell's are looking to outsource again. So I think the first question would be, would Tesco and John Lewis be comfortable with you outsourcing that as well? And then another question would be whether John Lewis would be happy, or rather Tesco would be happy about you accepting things from John Lewis. And also, how that's going to affect the relationship there, and your ability to actually provide the consistent stuff for Tesco, who were there first, weren't they? So let's have a look at the answer. So we could say something like this. Okay, so this isn't a full answer, but it's something that it's a good start. One advantage to Bell's Electricals of outsourcing is that it enables them to accept John Lewis's order. Bell's is currently working at 92% capacity utilisation, which could be seen as a problem, as it's a quite high percentage. Not outsourcing the kettles for the John Lewis order might mean that they're not able to meet the targets of the order because their capacity utilisation may be over its maximum output. Outsourcing would enable them to reduce their capacity utilisation, therefore potentially avoiding problems such as breakdowns in machinery due to overworking. This may lead to cost savings, as machinery won't be as fixed. Won't have to be fixed, and the production should be able to maintain a steady flow. In the short term, it would allow Bells to find a solution to increasing their ability to meet orders with existing machinery. However, in the long term, Bells might want to consider investing, improving the production. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of that, I say it's not a full answer. That's not a bad answer. For 12 marks, if you were to write that in an exam, you've probably written sort of 3/4 of a page or something like that. That's not a bad answer, actually. You've got a good bit of AO4 and things like that. But we've got to discuss, haven't we? Discuss is AO4, whether or not Bells, so we've got Bells, it's AO2, should be using outsourcing AO1 as a method to accept the orders. So I think we've got AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4 in this one. But as you can see, if you look at the start, we've got one thing I would add a nice little definition at the start, just for good merit of outsourcing. But we talk about what it is, how it applies to the company. And have you noticed that it's always about John Lewis, it's all about Bells, it's all about Tesco? They haven't mentioned the things which I would have mentioned, in terms of how it would affect them and things like that. But remember, whether or not they should use outsourcing as a method to accept the order, I suppose mine is more about whether they should accept the order in the first place, let alone whether they should use outsourcing to do it. So I suppose that would be something that maybe bring up in the conclusion. But it leads to a cost saving and things like that. And have you noticed as well at the end, there's some really, really good techniques here of short-term, long-term as well, which was really, really strong thing to do, isn't it, in this kind of stuff? That's what you want to be doing. Okay, so ladies and gents, that kind of brings us to where we want to be. We're going to have a little look at the news because it is kind of kicking off a little bit at the minute. And I say that, if it'll let me. There we go. We're going to have a little look at the news because there are some things I wanted to draw your attention to, especially yesterday as we were talking about redundancies and things like that. So there's this one. It says Lucas and Aston Martin cut 2,000 car jobs. This is just interesting to me because do you remember there was a hell of a lot of people who kept saying that the car industry would be totally fine in this country because we take so many cars, but it's just not true. We're not, and this is all to do with Brexit and the ability for the companies to be able to do just-in-time production. If you can't remember what that is, go back to one of my previous videos and have a look at it. Okay, so it's not about the fact that we all love the EU or all hate the EU or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that. It's about the ability for companies to be able to accept supplies at a very, very short amount of time and do outsourcing and things like that. Without tariffs and things like that. That's what they're worried about. So it says here, car dealerships, Lookers, has announced it will cut up to 1,500 jobs with the closure of more showrooms in the UK. The company reopened its showrooms on Monday after the government lifted coronavirus lockdown restrictions. Luxury car maker Aston Martin has also announced 500 redundancies a week after naming a new chief executive. It comes as the SMMT trade body said only 20,000 new cars were registered in May, down 89% year on year, the worst May performance since 1952. Car manufacturers, suppliers and showrooms have been closed for weeks with consumers in lockdown and holding off on big ticket purchases. Altrincham-based Lookers will shut another 12 sites, either by closure, merging with other showrooms or refranchising on top of the 15 dealerships being closed already under plans announced in November. The closures blamed on what Lookers called the structural changes taking place across the industry will leave it with 136 dealerships in the UK, so it's still a decent sized thing. The closure blamed on what Lookers, which employs 8,000 people, resumed trading its sites on the 1st of June with social distancing measures. We've taken the decision to restructure the size of the group's dealership estate to position the business for a sustainable future, which will regrettably means redundancy consultation with a number of our colleagues. It's a difficult one. It says here, it'd be interesting to see about, does it not mention? Nissan's car manufacturing plant in Sunderland, which employs 7,000 people, is unsustainable under a new no-deal Brexit. The car company is called the BBC. So we really are, and that's what's going to happen. You can take it to the bank. We are not leaving the EU with a deal. I don't know what the hell we're going to do, but we're not leaving with a deal. It's very unlikely now. So I don't know what. Maybe they could blame it on coronavirus or something, but yeah, this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of job losses and things like that. It says Eurozone is in fresh emergency action to boost economy. Quarantine rules kill a blow for travel sector. Let's have a look at the travel sector. It says here the travel industry has condemned the government's quarantine rules, warning the mandatory 2-week isolation will deter visitors and put jobs at risk. From the 8th of June, all passengers arriving in the UK must self-isolate for 14 days. The boss of the UK's biggest airport services company, Swissport, said the plan could deliver a killer blow to the tourism sector. Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary said it would be significantly reduce European visitors. Mr O'Leary said the countries in Europe have a lower rate of coronavirus than the UK. At the time when Italy, Greece, Spain and Portugal are removing visitor restrictions, the UK was imposing them. I have to agree with Michael O'Leary on this one, and that's a worrying sight for me because I don't really like the guy. He seems across as a bit of an idiot. But in terms of this, the worry is that we should have imposed these things ages ago. I don't understand why the hell we're still doing this. What do you mean we're imposing them now? They should have been imposed months ago. Maybe we wouldn't have had as many deaths if we'd have done that. Maybe we would, but it's strange now to be bringing it up now like a big issue. It says if it's so important and so relevant to the virus and we want the country to be safe, then why hasn't it been done in March? That's why everybody's quite confused on this. Well, yeah, I totally agree. The boss of tour operator Red Savannah said the government has failed to listen to the concerns of the travel industry. We are none the wiser to the science behind the rationale for quarantine. It is the wrong policy that's going to cause untold misery for hundreds of thousands of people. Interestingly enough, they're not having a go at them, are they? When everybody turned on teachers because we're all horrible and really, really lazy because we never do any work, do we? But students are all lazy as well, aren't you? You're lazy, I'm lazy, we're all lazy. I don't know who these people are who are fabulously busy and really proactive and getting out of bed, because we're not. Obviously, I'm doing this from my bed. In fact, I'm not even doing this. I don't know how this is even happening because this isn't happening, and you guys aren't watching it either. So it's everyone likes to have a jab, don't they? That's fair play. But it's interesting they're not going to have a jab at the tourism people, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, I want to go on holiday. Has the coronavirus thing finished? We're not worried about this. What's this one? Elliot Swan caught his mum applying through the window. Oh, this is talking about students not being able to get access to universities and things like that. All our work has stopped. Cast Broadway and Regional Theatre New York as well as TV. Everything has just been cleared. It's a massive issue, isn't it? It's a real problem. But there are going to be businesses still wanting people and things like that. It's not all as doom and gloom as it seems. There is still opportunities out there. You've got to. You've got to go and make opportunities as well, haven't you? That's just what entrepreneurs do. We take bad situations and we make good opportunities out of them. No one likes being made redundant, but what could it be? It could be the start of something really special for you. It could be the best thing that's ever happened to you. It's not going to be at this moment in time, but it depends, doesn't it? It says Layla Barnes is one of among the many thousands of small business owners left financially and emotionally devastated by more than 10 weeks of government-imposed lockdown. She was forced to close her Doncaster-based beauty therapy and training business, which was profitable in February before lockdown began. Yet the government's excluded Layla, 30, and her limited company for any form of crisis-related support, forcing her onto benefits of £408 per month. That's insane, isn't it? £100 a week. How could she possibly live on that? She's moved out of her rented home, unable to meet her rent and bills, written up thousands of pounds of credit card debt to try and preserve her business. If I lose my business, I've lost everything. I'd spent all my life savings, about 60 grand on equipment and machines. It's impressive. 60 grand's worth of savings. I wish I had 60 grand worth of savings. I'd rather lose my home than lose my business. So I moved in with my mum and dad, and me and my husband are now in the same box room that I moved out when I was 17. And there's a lot of people who won't even have that luxury either. As a result, she's undergone a huge amount of stress, which has rekindled a previously diagnosed mental health disorder, which made her feel like this is the worst time I've been through in my life, worse than anything from before. And she's not alone. Research published on Thursday by accountants serving 61,000 small businesses across the country, supports concerns that the shutdown is taking its toll on the client's mental health. Nearly three-quarters, 73%, report that clients are struggling to sleep. 67% reported worsened mental health, and 50% said that the clients had shared feelings of not being able to cope. According to the SME Health Tracker published by the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. In the earlier research on the 21st of May, 11% of accountants reported that clients had discussed thoughts of taking their own lives. Wow, that's it's terrible, isn't it? And when you look at this situation, as I said, the worrying thing for me, the thing which I think it's important to draw attention to, is the fact that when we had the financial collapse in this country, they were saying it was something like 500 billion we spent on it. I'd have to try and have a look at the actual. Let me just see if I can see. Sorry, yeah, 500 billion. 2008, the United Kingdom bank rescue package is 500 billion. All right. Now, put that in context. They said that if we were to continue it onto the end of October with nothing else, we'd have spent about 70 billion or something like that on thingy. Let me get you the actual number. Furlough. Where are we? Independent. Yeah, let's have a look. I'm just going to show you this because I think it's important. Let's have a look at this. Just a second. So how does the furlough scheme cost compared to 2008's bank bailout, Trident and HS2? Hopefully you know what Trident is. It's the big nuclear submarines and that we have. The jobs furlough is estimated to be costing 14 billion a month. How does this compare with other things that the government spend public money on? So, and this is the Independent, so hopefully it's a reputable thing. I mean, I'm saying that it's just a white page at the minute, so hopefully, or is it just a lovely picture? Let's force a reload, shall we? My privacy matters. Okay, so it says 22 billion social care for the elderly, 88 billion for HS2, 88 billion. Think of that. So we've spent. Is that a month? Where is it? The official estimate for the cost of it is 85 billion, and they're making a point of saying that the 14 billion it's costing us, it was 14 billion, wasn't it? 14 billion a month to do this, 14 billion a month to make sure that people's lives aren't destroyed, 14 billion a month to make sure that the country doesn't fall in on itself and that people aren't on the street because they can't pay their mortgages, e.g. the lady that we've just seen on the BBC. 14 billion a month, and yet they're spending stuff on things like that. 85 billion on HS2. I know which is more important at this moment in time. 41 billion on Trident nuclear weapons. Do you really? Is that the most important thing now? Because realistically, I'm not being funny, but if a nuclear weapon was to go off, we're all screwed anyway. We'd all fire the nuclear weapons, bang, bang, bang. We all go at once. It's like a Mexican standoff. We're all got a gun to each other's heads like this, and we think, right, okay, who shoots first? It's not going to matter. You know, it's good to have a deterrent, but can you see what I mean? You know, like that. That's crazy when we're talking about that, isn't it? 12 billion on affordable housing, so it's only slightly more than that, although they claim that the affordable housing thing wasn't in it. But it says here, in 2007 to 2009, it says that the government was forced to pay out 133 billion in cash. It also had to provide various public guarantees of banks' balance sheets, adding up to more than 1 trillion. Never in a field of financial endeavour has so much money been owed by so few to so many. It's incredible, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible. That's frightening. And what my point is that's not good enough. People being we are a first world country. We are very, very able to afford this kind of stuff. And it's worrying to me that they're trying to make out that we've no money, or that companies should be taking the brunt of this. Listen, that's what public money's for. Use the public money. I don't mind. Put tax up. We'll all pay it. Let's go for it. Austerity is going to be through the roof when we finish with this anyway, so it's going to be a crazy one. So sorry to go off on a tangent, but I think it's important to raise your understanding of what's actually happening in the economy at this moment in time, and to really get on those specific figures rather than going on generalizations and things like that. Have a look into it if you're interested. Anyway, I said it was going to be slightly shorter than normal. Hasn't been that much slightly shorter than normal, has it? For 45 minutes rather than an hour. But thank you very much for joining me. I will see you tomorrow. I hope you have a healthy and happy rest of your day.